created everything. Look what a powerful being you are. You did these things, but now you're in a human body, you forget the power you have.
What you do is what the whole universe is doing at the place you call here and now. You are something the whole universe is doing in the same way that a wave is something that the whole ocean is doing.
You're doing it.
Doing what?
Using your imagination.
Welcome to Metamystics, where you don't know what you don't know. My name's Jonathan.
I'm Sean.
And today we got a very special guest for the very first time. Welcome to the show, Nicole Luna.
Thank you for having me.
Very excited for this kind of conversation. For one, I saw you're a bit of a witch, aren't you? And I mean that in the best way possible.
With all due respect.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely identify as a practicing witch. So yeah.
And you live in Salem, which is so sick.
I sure do. And it's just kind of end of crazy busy tourist season now. So it's finally starting to calm down.
Is that Halloween? Halloween is the tourist season in Salem?
It's like mid-September to mid-November. Things are really, really crazy. Now I can actually go and get my coffee again and not have to wait in line for 30 minutes. And it's lovely.
Nice.
Do you ever notice like some things happening around there that's just like a little unusual during that time? Or is it just there's too many people around and that's pretty much the vibe you're catching?
I mean, okay, so I have to be careful because I'm a business owner in Salem and I don't want to encourage people not to come in October. Come in October, spend all your money. But it definitely, October brings an interesting group of people, I find. People come and visit Salem all year round. You know, we're not an amusement park, we're a city, and people come here for historical reasons or with spiritual interests and different things. But in October, you get a mix of, you know, really hardcore Halloween enthusiasts who know nothing about the history of Salem and are just here for a Halloween party. And then you get some people who are, you know, kind of just here to like drink and have fun. And there's tons of bachelorette parties and bachelor parties. It's kind of like Nashville vibes, right? Like for you know, parties. But then, you know, October can bring some resistance to, we have a lot of street preachers and really like visibly frustrated people who are very anti everything that you know, Salem stands for, I guess. But
I tell you what, I'm so for a large portion of my life I lived in Louisiana, and you would go down to Bourbon Street and one half would be absolutely bonkers, off the hook craziness, especially during Mardi Gras and during the parade times and stuff like that. And then you would see just these like extremely religious people, and they would be holding up the most extreme signs, like that basically repent or go to hell, or, you know, gayness is a sin and you need to get right with God. I'm like, dude, right here is where you want to say this? Like, it's kind of crazy, you know?
Yeah, it is a little much sometimes, for sure. And I think, you know, over the last couple of years, we've noticed it's gotten more and more common to see a lot of street preachers and things. And this year, I think we even had a couple of, I guess, gospel singers kind of like standing at the entry points of shops and like encouraging people to like not enter the shops and like all of this kind of stuff. So it was an interesting year for sure.
I wonder, is that something that you can like sue for?
Well, it's really interesting because there are some businesses in town that have taken some legal steps, especially after this October.
Yeah, that should be called like loitering at least, right?
Yeah, I think with the whole freedom of speech thing makes things confusing, right? So but
yeah, you're just trying to be out there and make a living. You know?
Yeah, and it's just kind of a little bit of a weird vibe. And it is really October that we see the most of that. The rest of the year, people are pretty chill.
It's like, didn't they learn enough lessons whenever they killed all the witches? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you would think so.
Yeah, crazy times. I would love to visit it out there. It looks beautiful.
It's
Um,
actually gorgeous here. I think a lot of people assume that it's like Halloween all the time, but Salem's a really small city of about 45,000 people, so not a ton of people live here.
hmm,
And we're right on the water, and it's a beautiful maritime town with a lot of history outside of the witch trials.
Hmm.
And yeah, we have like a maritime festival, but we also have a really strong witchcraft community here of people who are legitimate practicing magicians and witches. And yes, some people are coming here for the aesthetic of things, and then there are people who are coming here to learn and kind of seeing Salem as a little bit of a mecca, a witchcraft mecca.
yeah, I would imagine it's a little bit like, you move to LA if you're trying to be an actor, and maybe you move to Salem if you're trying to be like a professional tarot reader or something like that.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of work, especially in like the summer and leading into late fall.
Wow. And this is something we've really been trying to get in deep into the symbolism of tarot a lot. And
Hmm.
we started reading this one book by Rachel Polak,
Okay, love her. Yeah,
78 Degrees of Wisdom. I mean,
perfect.
I always hear like all of the like seasoned vets tarot readers, they always refer back to that book, like saying that she was
Oh
just
yeah.
on it, right?
Yeah, she's great.
And
Yeah.
already we're learning so much about just the subtleties of the symbols that you see in the cards, and it's like the way that they break it down. It's like, oh my goodness, it's so much easier to really apply that to a reading and or to gather a more full understanding of what that card really is trying to portray.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many archetypes to take into consideration. And whenever I teach like a tarot class, it's always so funny. I try to give a couple of brief sort of examples where the students go in without any information and just try to dissect a card based on like what it looks like, the colors that are coming up, the imagery, that sort of thing. And we could probably spend an entire hour talking about the Fool, for example, just
Hmm.
because of how much is there, or like the High Priestess is another one, or
Hmm.
the Wheel of Fortune for sure. All the
Yeah.
major Arcana cards definitely have a lot of deep symbolism.
Yeah, that high priestess was blowing our damn minds as far as all the
Right?
symbolism with her, and she's in between the two pillars and what it
The
means to go
veil and
beyond, and
Yeah.
what was it, like the moon card shows the backside of the pillars
yeah.
of the high priestess or something crazy
Hmm.
like that. We were like,
Yeah.
"What?"
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually a really fun activity to lay all the cards out and like read it almost like a picture that's continuing, like almost like a story that's being told.
Oh,
I mean, I'm
right.
sure you've heard of the Fool's
Oh,
Journey.
that's what it is, right? It's the
Yeah,
story of the fool kind of going
yeah.
through. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense,
You
actually.
know what? I do
Mhm.
have a question, and this is something that we've been really trying to figure out.
Mhm.
Whenever the fool goes on this journey, is
Mhm.
he meeting the magician and meeting the high priestess, or is he becoming that?
That's a really good question. And I think it depends, maybe how you're interpreting the cards at the time that you're doing the reading and what the question maybe is. Because I
Okay.
certainly think that those cards can all come up as, people and circumstances that are happening in your life, even if
Right.
that's not directly representing you. But I also feel that cards don't come up randomly and that you can certainly embody the different archetypes that are being shown to you at the
Mhm.
time. So I could see both for sure.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that always had me questioning, because whenever the fool has the little knapsack, right, with over his shoulder, but then he gets to
Mhm.
the magician, and the magician has all the things that the fool had in his knapsack. So I'm like,
Yeah.
is he becoming that? You know what I mean? But of course, it could just be like a mental trip at this point, like almost like a meditative journey that he's going on or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, obviously, we have masculine and feminine characters represented in the Fool as well. So it may not necessarily be the Fool himself
Right.
that's being represented. Um, but I do think it's quite interesting. Like you mentioned, the backpack, like we don't really know what he has in there, but we assume he doesn't have much, right? Because he's
Hmm.
literally got like a teeny tiny little pack on his stick. He looks pretty ill prepared for his journey, if you ask me,
Yeah.
hence the Fool.
Very
Um,
Quite
foolish.
foolish.
so yes. Yeah, absolutely. There's a really interesting deck that came out. I don't remember the year it came out, but it's called the After Tarot. And it kind of shows you, like, for example, the Fool, rather than it just being, him about to fall off the cliff or walk off the cliff. It's what would have happened a few moments later. So you see him kind of like holding on, and the dog is like barking at him from the top of the. So it's kind of just an interesting perspective shift.
Right.
So that's kind of a fun. There's so much you can do with tarot.
Oh
It's
my
like a
God.
never-ending, lifelong learning thing. For sure.
Right. That's really interesting, actually. Like the full Hank clinging on to something, right? Like he made the jump, but then all of a sudden he decides he wants to hold on. There's something holding him back in the dog, which is
Right.
like representative of the animal instinct being like, I told you not to do that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, sometimes we think we're ready. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Exactly.
so you have that oh shit moment, and it's
You
like,
find out real
Mhm.
quick. Yeah, man.
yeah. So I noticed that that you're also deeply into astrology as well, and that is something. It is so expansive, and it's like so deep to even try and learn it. How does your mind even hold all that information in there? Like, because there's different ways of reading the spin of the planets and the location and conjunct
Sure.
and all this other stuff. I'm just like, anybody that knows how to read that kind of stuff, I'm just like, okay, you're way smarter than me.
Well, I actually was super intimidated by astrology for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, just because it is such a vast kind of undertaking, especially because there's so many branches of astrology and ways to approach it. In the last, I want to say maybe 10 or 15 years, ancient astrology and whole sign astrology has become really, really popular, where like I was raised in on Placidus, which is just a different timing method. Um, but it wasn't really until about, I think, maybe 4 or 5 years ago that I started academically really getting into astrology, attending conferences on certain astrological techniques. And Salem has an astrology group, which is I'm so lucky to be a part of. So, once a month I get to learn with a bunch of people, and there's different people from different walks of life and different experience levels, everywhere from professional astrologers to people who are just like getting started. And once I think that you can kind of navigate the discomfort of looking at the chart, like actually looking at your astrological birth, the wheel,
Right.
and understanding that there's houses and that the planets can live in these houses, and like what does that mean and how does that shift things for your reality, then things become a lot more interesting and make a lot more sense. I think I was just like viewing astrology from the place of a scared math kid who like hated math. Like it just looked like math to me at first. I was like, okay, I can't do this because this reminds me
It's
of like
overwhelming.
some sort of graph that would have freaked me out in high school. So I think that was definitely like a learning curve that I had to get over. And I'm really lucky to have friends who are professional astrologers and have been able to support me and, kind of answering a lot of my questions and making things make more sense.
Yeah, and that's something, we have talked about a little bit, like the differences between tropical and Vedic and
Yeah.
sidereal, and even that's confusing because you're like, well, tropical is kind of basing it on the sign of 2,000 years ago or whatever, and sidereal is like what's happening right now, but why is it that they both kind of seem right? You know what I mean? Like for one, in tropical, I'm a Taurus, in sidereal, I'm an Aries. I'm like, why is it that
Right.
they both seem right then, you know?
Yeah, and I think, I think there's validity in all different forms of astrology, and they have different ways of kind of shedding light on different things. The way I kind of view it is, I approach certain astrological techniques for certain questions that I have, maybe. I certainly spend a lot less time. I mean, just checking out my natal chart at this point. I'm more interested in looking at the current transits and how the planets in the sky are interacting with the planets in my chart. Because that kind of puts me in the middle of the action with globally how other people might be feeling too, which is
Hmm.
really interesting because, the current current political climate and the current, collective consciousness has certainly been quite interesting to track over, like, especially since COVID.
Right.
Astrologers have been having a field day,
I'm
just kind
sure.
of understanding the current energies and things like that.
Yeah, I imagine it's got to be wild. Like, and you see a lot of people are really almost like able to almost like prophesize certain dates of which things are going to start to happen. And it is just really mind blowing. And, and I think that for anybody that just throws astrology out the window, or they're like, oh, you believe in that zodiac stuff, or, I'm like, have you ever gotten like a full chart read done? Like, I'm not talking about, your astrology zodiac or whatever in the newspaper or anything like that. I'm talking about the date, the time, the place, all the more intricate kind of stuff. And usually the people that do it, they're like, that's spooky how close that is, like so spot on. And it does make you wonder, like, do you think, and maybe you are like, maybe it's like built in or something like that, especially for an astrologer, but so what do you think is really going on? How is it that the stars know so much about us?
I don't know if it's that the stars know so much about us, that it would be that we are a reflection of what was happening at the moment of our birth. So there's imagine it being almost like a timestamp. Like, okay, uh, so for Jonathan's coming into this world at whatever time, stamp of approval, right? And that stamp of approval is like a time capsule of what exactly was going on in the sky at the time of your birth. And I think a lot of people, that's one of the first reasons that they throw astrology out the window, is say, well, I know many people with the same birthday as me, and maybe I'm a Capricorn, but I don't feel like a Capricorn, right? So there's this like overly simplified example of what astrology would be. And I think that when we can understand that it's really a, a specific moment in time that's being captured and kind of used as a jumping off point for where you're going in your life and how things will feel for you. Yeah, so it's less about like the planets kind of affecting you and more your life being reflected in the planets. Because, I think that the one of the problems with predictive astrology is that we sit around and like wait for the bad thing to happen. And one of the most intelligent things I think anybody's ever told me is astrological transits can feel like a shout, or they can feel like a whisper. So it can be a really mild effect of what's going on in your life, and you can identify it maybe if you look at your chart and go, that's why I had no energy today, right? But maybe it was a nothing kind of day, versus looking at that chart and predicting that that day would be XYZ. Sometimes I think it's just helpful to kind of retroactively look at what was going on rather than always be trying to predict, because we really just don't know. Things can play out in many, many ways.
Now, let's say you were to document, because it's a well-known thing, Mercury in retrograde. Just found out that that's going on right now, thanks to you, but it makes a lot of sense. But let's say you were to almost document in your own chart, and you would say, well, this time last year, whenever this planet was in retrograde on this day at this time, this thing happened to me. Would you then be able to forecast what is to come, maybe a year from that date or a year from that same kind of location of the planet?
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think that's how modern astrologers practice good, um, I don't want to call it science, but it kind of is science, right? But they practice good science by gathering information. Most astrologers that I know who are professionals, meaning like people who are writing for academic journals or writing books and these kinds of things, these are people who are collecting a ton of data so that they can literally follow people and see how this all works out for them. You know what I mean? And then that's how we are able to gather information, is by looking and seeing what happened to this person. That's, I think, also why celebrity astrology is so popular, because like they're living their lives in front of us.
Yeah.
And even if we don't know exactly how they're feeling or the little nuances of their life, the big things that happen in their career usually line up with really significant astrological transits. And so I think that that's um, one nice thing that we kind of have with celebrity type astrology. We tend to see kind of big things go on, for example, during a celebrity's Saturn return. That can be a really significant time between the ages of 28 and 32, we generally see a lot of celebrities put out something that's very groundbreaking. Like they'll win their first Grammy or their first Oscar, or it'll be like their big magnum opus comes out during that time. Or even sometimes we see, I'm sure you guys have heard of like the Curse of 27 with all the celebrities that
Yeah,
pass.
27 Club.
That's right before your Saturn return. So like this is like there's an explanation astrologically to why this tends to happen for some people.
Hmm.
And I think the hard part about patterns, looking at astrology, um, is there's always something different happening in the sky. So it's like it's never going to be exactly like it was the last time that that planet was doing that thing. So that makes it confusing, but also I think nice because I think that we would just drive ourselves crazy if we were predicting the future for ourselves all the time.
And maybe there'd be a lot of
there'd be a lot of
well, I was gonna say maybe there'd be like a lot of Groundhog Day kind of shit going on at that
Oh
point.
yeah, that too.
Well, I think if you're constantly looking back at something and going, "Oh, this is what happened the last time that this star or this planetary alignment was happening," then there's almost some sort of conscious awareness of that energy or of that maybe it was a negative thing, right? And say this is a week away, and maybe you're almost kind of charging that situation more just by thinking about it in that way instead of kind of allowing it to express itself more naturally, you know.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that we should hope that we would have learned and grown and had some sort of healing experience from whatever we were put through the previous time.
Right.
And that maybe it's just going to be different this time because that planet or, that particular transit is trying to teach us something different.
Right, of course.
Interesting. I do have a strange question for you, and you don't necessarily have to answer it, but
Mhm.
and I'm going somewhere with this. It's not just
Okay.
a regular question, but like, have you ever done psychedelics?
Yes, I have.
Would you say that it's a bad idea to do psychedelics with Mercury in retrograde?
It's a really good question. Probably yes, I would assume so. Yeah, I mean,
Asking for a
listen, I
friend.
think that
Of course.
intentional work is always possible. Mercury retrograde is generally frowned upon to do like magical work during that time. And I do think that intentional use of plants can be a magical kind of experience. And there could be information that you receive or that you document or journal when you're doing that sort of work that might get confused potentially by Mercury retrograde. Mercury is the messenger planet. He's supposed to be the messenger to the gods. And I like to joke and say, like, when Mercury is in retrograde, it's like he's on vacation. So it's or out of office. And I've told people, like, have you ever tried to like get an appointment with your doctor, or your hairdresser, your dentist, whatever, and like you're calling during the lunch break and like you're like, fuck, like, you know what I mean? Like you're just trying to like get a hold of somebody. That's Mercury in retrograde. So magically trying to manifest and asking for things, it's like just kind of hitting, nobody's hearing the information. And the same can go with downloading or receiving information, being receptive to the messages that might be supportive in a psychedelic type of experience. I don't think it would necessarily be bad, but I do think that precautions should potentially be taken a little bit more seriously. And if possible, there could be, I mean, there are a lot of astrologers who would elect a time to do psychedelics. Like they would look at their transits and be like, you know what? I'm going to wait till this time because I'll receive better information.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I would never even have thought of that until just right now. But like, yeah, I guess it does make sense. Of course it does. If that is, if your birthday is essentially a snapshot of what was happening in the sky, then, Mercury retrograde or any kind of negativity that would point in that direction, I'm sure would affect your life in some kind of way. And maybe it's not even negativity. It's just, it's just polar at that point. There's always going to be white and black and light and dark, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think Mercury retrograde, the way I can describe it is any word that starts with like reframe, reflect, review. Those are
Right.
the words that encompass what Mercury retrograde is about. Like it's really a time to chill and to just spend time in reflection, and to kind of press pause and see about what needs to be tied up, like any loose ends that need to be tied up, those sorts of things. Yeah, so I mean, with that being said, like a spiritual experience like that could be very supportive because potentially it could help you to do that reflective work that you're meant to do. But I would probably plan it very specifically, just the same way that I might, you know, try to arrive a little bit earlier at the airport if I was flying somewhere during Mercury retrograde, or expect a delay or that sort of thing.
When is Mercury retrograde end?
The 29th, I believe, of November.
All right.
So.
Yeah, I'm flying out on Thursday, so I got to make sure I get there early.
You'll be okay.
We'll get you there early, dude. 4 hours
You'll
early.
be okay.
You know?
I mean, hey, at least
you could petition Jupiter and just on Thursdays, on Jupiter's day, and just be like, help me out.
Throw me a bone here, Jupiter.
Throw me a bone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I feel like there's just so much to learn about astrology in general, and I'm always so fascinated to hear people talk in depth about it. There was a matter of fact, I don't know, it was probably like 5 years ago, and I matched with somebody on a dating site or something along those lines. And we kicked it off, and it was a really good conversation. We were on the phone for like 3 hours the first time we got on the phone. It was really good. And she was like, "Hey, just want to let you know I'm really into astrology." And I was like, "Oh, cool. Yeah, I mean, it's always seemed interesting to me." And so she asked for, all the information so that she can pull my chart together. And as amazing as that conversation was, she looked at my chart and she was like, "I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore." I'm like,
after your background check, I don't approve.
Yeah. I don't love that.
Yeah, I thought maybe that was a little extreme,
Well, that would be an example of assuming that everyone's pattern is the same, right? Like that would be an example of an oversimplification of astrology. Like, just because Scorpio is an intense sign connected to, maybe some darker things, that doesn't mean that Scorpios in general embody that. Or, just because you had a bad experience with a Gemini doesn't mean that like all Geminis are going to like float in that same boat. So, yeah, I don't love that. Like, I do understand why pop astrology has made it very common for people to kind of like navigate dating and friendships around astrology. But I think it's an overgeneralization. Certainly, I have some things in my chart that I don't want to say I'm embarrassed about those things, but they would be probably considered to be like, we'll see about that. But I've seen those things play out in my life in, I think, quite positive ways. I'm a Capricorn. Capricorns, I feel like, are pretty misunderstood. I would say probably like Capricorn, Gemini, and Scorpio are the three that I think people just like get wrong a lot.
Yeah.
But I think that there's room to play with that kind of thing, especially in relationships, but you don't want to like freak yourself out or throw away an opportunity because there's something that looks a little strange in a chart.
And you never know what it's going to look like person to person. Maybe they're surface level Gemini, but once you get to know them, maybe they're not, as two-faced or something,
Well, yeah, and there's also, these shadow aspects of each of the signs and then evolved versions of the way that the sign expresses itself. So when we hear about things like, Gemini is two-faced, for example, which is like a very broad generalization. But that would be like a shadowy way that somebody who maybe hasn't been on a healing journey or isn't very self-aware could express that Gemini energy versus a very evolved, maybe like self-aware Gemini who's gone to therapy or something, might just be really expressing and holding that mercurial, like academic, social, talkative kind of energy that goes along with Gemini and feels a little bit more open than maybe another way that it could be taken.
That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, there's levels to this shit as there is
Of
everything,
Yeah.
Now I know that you give like classes and stuff on this, huh?
I sure do. So, basically kind of how it started was I had been doing a lot of like virtual education work for years before moving to Salem. And then when I did move to Salem, I was really surprised to see not a lot of educational resources. Like, don't get me wrong, there are resources if you go hunting for them, but you need to kind of like know people or know where to go, and it wasn't always as obvious. And I was planning on doing readings here in town, and I had a space for myself to take in-person clients. And I thought it would just be nice to offer classes and so I teach, and then I also have guest teachers that come in and teach on different topics. And one of the nice things that we've been able to do in this space is also host ritual circles for people, which has been really nice because I think a lot of people, when they think about magic and witchcraft, there's this shroud of mystery that kind of goes into it, and then we have like TikTok showing us like what the cute aesthetic witchy altar should look like, and here's all your crystals and these kinds of things. So for people to see like a genuine practice represented, I think is really nice, and to be able to talk to other people and just participate in something a little bit outside of the ordinary, especially for tourists, I think could be very valuable.
Well, and that's something that I think too, as far as maybe why people feel very comfortable in religion. Like the people that do get involved in religion, I think that it's more so, and I could be wrong, I think that it's more so a sense of tradition and community. And they just like having that camaraderie of this person believes what I believe. And so now we can be friends, and now we're not judging each other and stuff like that. And I think that, when people go to church, it's like, I can't tell you how many times that I have had conversations with people that regularly go to church, and they're very proud to be, whatever their religion is. And then you ask them any kind of question, or you ask them about a story or something like that, and they don't even understand the depths of it. That maybe they never even heard of the story. And so that leads me to believe, oh, you're kind of doing this for the community and for the tradition almost. It's almost like celebrating Christmas. You know what I mean? You ain't even got to be religious. You can just celebrate Christmas. That's kind of like how I look at some people. And that's totally fine. I mean, who are we to judge by any means? Everybody has their own things that they get out of whatever religion or spiritual practice that is. But yeah, I found it very, very interesting whenever you ask somebody certain in-depth questions, or, like they can't separate. And this is something we've been talking about a little bit, is like being able to separate some of the conversations between, did Jesus say this or did Paul say this? You've been seeing like a lot of that go around, and quite fascinating. But, yeah, that's why I love this whole spiritual stuff, because there are, smaller, I think, communities, maybe, like, for example, I used to podcast in a studio that was in the back of a crystal shop, and we had, yeah, it was awesome. I loved it in there. But we had like this kind of community of people that would come in every day. Hey, how you doing? Maybe they wouldn't even try and buy a crystal or a tarot pack or anything like that. They just want to come and say hi, and I just love that kind of community thing. So I love that what you're doing is, you're kind of like bringing people together and getting them a little bit more familiar, because there's a lot of crap on the internet, and a lot of it is not very useful, and so it's nice to have actual people who understand it to the depths that you do.
Yeah, I mean, one of the pros I think of having the internet is we just have a lot of information, right? When I was first getting into magic and witchcraft, when I was like 13, 14, I was hiding in the library with all the witchy books, or like going to a bookstore and like, had a very small selection of resources. Back in the day, we used to have this almost like Craigslist for witches. It's called Witchvox, and it was this online portal of message boards. It's obviously things have really changed. There's a very, very strong magical education community online, and a ton of free information, which is great. But it also just, that kind of access to a platform allows anybody to be a quote expert in the field. So I just encourage people to kind of do your research and cross-reference things and use multiple sources to arrive at your own understanding of things, because magic and witchcraft can be very intuitive, and it can be very open to interpretation, and there's so many paths to take, and there's so many traditions if you do choose to kind of follow a specific magical tradition. So yeah, there's pros and cons, I think, about having all of that now.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's nice to have almost like teachers guiding you in the direction. Not to say that you can't learn some things on your own, for sure. Like there's a lot of great resources and a lot of great books and stuff like that, but just to be able to have that one-on-one with somebody who is like a teacher in person, man, I think that that is it just goes a long way. You know, and that's like one of the reasons why we love doing this show is talking to people like you who really just get it and can kind of try and like guide us in the correct direction, whether it is with astrology or tarot or whatever the case may be. You know, we've had like certain shamans come on the show and certain mystics come on the show, and we're like, let us be a sponge in the sea of you, sir. That's what we want, you know, and just love that kind of stuff. It's just so fun because there's so much depth to all of this spiritual stuff. And, you know, maybe you always thought, like me personally, growing up, I loved those kind of movies, the ones that were like, you know, your Hocus Pocuses and your Matildas and, you know, just weird things like Harry Potter, weird things like that. You were like, man, I just wish that was real. I wish there was something real to that, you know? And now the older you get, the more you understand that, well, it's not necessarily real in the context that they're putting it, but there is some semblance, like I always say, you're not going to get like a lightning bolt shoot out of your wand, but maybe you won't see the visual manifestation of it, but maybe there's a little bit of magical manifestation of that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that when people come to magic specifically and they start understanding how it works and how it's showing up in their lives, um, you know, it takes a minute to kind of, I think, adjust to the understanding of what's actually happening, and to not, you know, be disappointed by the fact that it's not going to be this like fantastical Harry Potter situation. Um, or like, you know, the Hollywood interpretation of what it looks like to do magic, which is a lot of my education, the way I educate people, I guess, here in town, especially certain, you know, tourists who come in October, are mostly coming to kind of understand what is the reality of magic, like what is actually possible and what's not possible. Um, you know, I've had people very, very sincerely ask me if I can fly and if different things can happen. And I have to, you know, sorry to disappoint you, but metaphorically, sure, I can fly. You know, I've had many a channeled experience with that kind of thing, but it's not me levitating off of the ground, unfortunately, in front of your eyes. So, you know, yeah, I do think that the power is very real, and the way that I've been able to bring certain things into my life, the way that I have so many you know, experiences that I can't explain, that I just have to chalk it up to there being something real in all of this. And I really do believe that. And I think every now and then it's very healthy to kind of question and just say, "Oh, you know, I'm a witch. What's going on here, man? Like, um, have I drank all the Kool-Aid? But just checking myself. And yeah, and then it just continues to show me what I'm capable of, what the universe is capable of, what spirit's capable of. So keeps me stuck here, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, if
Yeah.
you don't mind, and I know that we just said, you know, that there's so many different layers to it and different ways that people can really look at it. Like, how do you look at this as far as like if you're doing a spell or something
Mhm.
of that sort? What do you visualize in your mind? What do you think that is actually happening there?
So a lot goes into the design of a spell for me. I don't, the thing I think is super misunderstood about magic and witchcraft is that practicing witches are doing magic all the time. And there's certainly magical practices that I implement as part of my daily experience for protection and grounding and other techniques. But manifestation is not spells for manifestation are not something that I'm doing all the time. I'm
Right.
doing that when I have a specific goal in mind. And so typically that looks like me being able to also plan um, to execute a spell according to something like astrological
Hmm.
election, which would be taking a peek at my chart, what's happening to the chart, what the planets are currently doing and what they will be doing, and choosing an appropriate time that's going to be supportive for the spell or for the magical working. And then, I also work with specific gods and goddesses and different deities. There's a couple Catholic saints that I'm really friendly with too, that come along for the ride from time to time. Really, I think that magic and witchcraft is totally a choose your own adventure kind of thing. So it's a combination of me employing or requesting the support of certain spirits that I've become familiar with. And that familiarity comes from developing a relationship with them. So giving offerings, lighting candles and incense for certain gods and goddesses, learning about their mythologies and their stories. And then, having faith that when you call on them, they're going to respond, they're going to support. And sometimes, like, I don't know if you've heard of this kind of like a goofy chicken soup for the soul phrase, but the idea that you can have a friendship that's for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. I think the same can go with relationships with spirits. And we see that in the witchcraft community, where like maybe there is a spirit that I'm going to work with for a particular goal. And it doesn't mean that I have to have this lifelong kind of devotional experience with that spirit, but maybe I'm very inspired by their story. And maybe I'm going through something in my life that they can help me with. So that becomes a part of it, kind of designing the appropriate time and who I'm going to work with. And then I really am very intentional about the materials that I'm bringing in. So whether it's herbs or candles or whatever, there's different magical correspondences that go along with everything and are very helpful in kind of, again, drawing attention to the working and like, oh, this is what this this is what this girl is asking for. And then a lot of, I think, the way that magic is able to start going to work is by embodying the result before it's even come to you. So, for example, if I was trying to manifest more money or more prosperity in my life, I probably wouldn't be talking about my lack of funds or, constantly checking my bank statement, even though, that's a reasonable thing. But I wouldn't be living my life post prosperity spell anxiously thinking about money. I would be trying my best to kind of live a life that feels like the money's on the way, or it feels like it's already been brought to me. So yeah, a lot of it is also about the mind.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect. Because my next question was going to be like, what does that look like? What are the things that you are typically looking for, or are you not looking for them? Are you kind of like setting it and forgetting it type of thing, which is a practice we've kind of heard, time and time again. And so I guess that really makes sense if you are embodying that person that would be more prosperous, then the things that you would be seeing, you would have to be seeing those things because you just became that person
aligned
in
with
a sense. So it's like the magic is inside out, coming from within and outward.
And I mean, it's like I've told clients this before. You can't work a spell for a new job and not put your resume out there. You can't
right.
make a spell for love and then not join the dating site because it's cringy or whatever. Like you got to put yourself out there. Like it does require practical, real-time life work. But I just feel like magic is that special sauce that just helps things get moving in the right direction, and inspires me to do the thing that I need to do and to like bring myself enough energy to go out there and do it. It helps me get the motivation that I need to manifest the goals for myself.
Yeah, you're literally setting the tone for the reality you'd like to see.
Yeah.
And putting that out there into the physical with something tangible, and then you're just kind of going with the flow and taking that ride after that.
Yeah.
Love it.
Do the work a little bit. Yeah, that does make a lot of sense that you're taking that first step. And that's actually something that so I do past life regressions. And I don't know if you ever heard of Dolores Cannon. But one of the things that she always said is that, part of the hypnosis, like especially if it's even, I mean, either way, but just for this example, part of the hypnosis is whenever that person decides to get in their car and drive to you. Like that's the first step of hypnosis because they already made it. Like they've already taken that first step. They got in their car, they got over their fears or whatever, they decided to do it, and almost essentially it's opening up that doorway to allow the hypnosis and the past life regression to even begin to work before I even see them. And I always love that because it's showing that, by taking initiative into something, that's that first real big step, is just almost allowing and paving that road to even allow you to travel down it.
Yeah, I think that receptivity is so important for anything that you're doing, whether you're going to sit down and ask your tarot cards to like really give it to you straight. You're making an agreement before you've even done any of the work that you're going to be receptive to hearing from the universe, and then magically, receptive um, to the thing actually happening. And if you kind of set the intention for the thing to happen, almost how embarrassing would it be if you sat around and did nothing to contribute to that process, right? It's like asking somebody to come and help you. Okay, well, this is a bad example. Maybe some people do this, but like if you have somebody employ somebody to help you clean your home, right? I don't know. I've employed a handful of cleaners at different points in my life, and I always clean up before they come to my house. Like I'm always like, you know what I mean? Like I just don't want them to see like the dirty laundry or whatever, right? And I think that like that's kind of what it looks like
Right.
to set the stage and the to create the right environment to welcome that energy into your life.
Yeah, yeah. I almost kind of reminds me of like the Brownie the Elf stories about how if
Yeah.
you got one, you got to make sure your house ain't too dirty or too clean, otherwise it ain't gonna have nothing to do or too much to do.
Yeah.
Um, and you had mentioned about how you kind of work with a bunch of different gods and goddesses, almost like you're kind of eclectic in that way, right? Which
Very, yeah,
I
very
love.
eclectic.
Like whenever we learned about eclecticism and stuff like that, we were like, oh, that's got to be the way, right? And but just out of curiosity, and I don't know if you'd be comfortable sharing this, but like which specific kind of gods and goddesses have you found the most luck with?
Yeah, so I'll let you know that I was raised Catholic. So I kind of, when I was dipping my toe in the witchy waters, was feeling a little bit of residual religious guilt. That good old Catholic guilt that sticks that
That'll
sticks with
get
you
you.
forever. Um, it'll get you. But yeah, I think that had an impact on the timeline that it took for me to actually start working with spirits because I was like, well, that's like real. Like, you know what I mean? Like it just kind of, I was like, the crystals are fine, the tarot cards are fine. Like, I don't know, even talking to dead people feels okay, but like gods and goddesses feels very official. So how it kind of got started was I had heard about the goddess Brigid, and she is a Celtic goddess of the hearth and home, but she's also a Catholic saint. So they basically just couldn't get the Irish to stop worshiping this woman. So they created kind of like a side story for her where she was a nun. She had this like, life story, a saint story. And a lot of the things that they include in her life story as a nun are very reflective of the themes of Bridget the goddess. So she felt safe because I was kind of like, well, they couldn't really get rid of her completely. So like, let me get started with Bridget. So she was kind of my entry point, and she's been incredible to work with. Very like big sister energy, very warm but still kind of tough in that way, that tough love. And she's been so supportive, especially with anything regarding the home, since she is, the goddess of hearth and home. Actually, most recently, she helped me find my new apartment, which has been really funny because when I kind of put it out there to her, I was like, you need to show me a very obvious sign, like when I'm in the place that it's the apartment. And my neighbors ended up informing me in the apartment building that I live in that they were moving. They bought a house and they were moving. And I wasn't really close with them, but they were like, if you want to come over and check out the unit, like come on over. And I walked in and there was a giant like Bridget's cross on the wall. So the the owner was like a devotee of Bridget, which was such a like
Interesting.
ridiculously obvious
Super
sign.
obvious. Right. I don't
So
think it
now I
gets any
live
more
here.
obvious. Right.
But like, yeah, so those kinds of things. So yeah, definitely Bridget was kind of an entry point. Other Celtic goddesses have come up for me as well. And then probably in the last, I want to say 6 or 7 years, the Norse pantheon has been really like inspiring to me. And I work with Odin a little bit. As a masculine deity, I've always been very inspired by his devotion to knowledge
Mhm.
and kind of figured that a good way of honoring him would be to promise that I would always teach in some sort of capacity. I was a school teacher for 10 years before I started doing this professionally. So it felt like I'm always going to be a kind of a teacher. And I was very inspired to work with a god who always wanted to learn. So, that's kind of, those are two of the main um, spirits that I tend to work with. And then, not for the pun, but not to throw the baby out with the bathwater completely. My husband grew up Italian Catholic family, so we do have some saints that we kind of bring in as well, some Catholic saints who I feel very inspired by. And Catholicism is so damn witchy and so ritualized. And I just
Right.
actually really love it for that reason. And so, it's not uncommon to see me leaving offerings for both goddesses and saints, because I just find them all to be very helpful.
And that makes so much sense too. Like, why wouldn't you pick the saints or the goddesses that you would most relate with or be more comfortable with if it is
Mhm.
all kind of a one consciousness type of thing and an archetype, if you will. So to embody that energy, something that you are comfortable with, it's just gonna, we just found out recently that I forget who it was that told us this recently, but we are kind of our own synchronicity generator, and so our own consciousness is kind of playing around with the outside world. And so if you're thinking about something and then whenever you see it, like if you ask for a sign, it's like you asked for that sign, right? And so then somehow you're able to, like, your subconscious is ready to see something that would relate to exactly what you were asking for, and that's exactly what happened. And so I don't know, I think this world is just pretty amazing in that way when it comes to consciousness and magic and all of these things. It's pretty awesome.
It's very, very interesting. And yeah, I find like whenever I start having doubts, which is normal, and like I said, I think that's a really good way of keeping your foot in the sanity pool.
Hmm.
But whenever you're kind of having those doubts about certain things, I think for me, that's when things tend to ramp up and I tend to see a lot more results and a lot more signs. It just kind of keeps drawing me back in.
Hmm.
It's the whole spirituality thing has just never left me. It's always been interesting. It's always kept calling me back.
Yeah, and once you go down that road, there's no going back, because you see all the weird synchronicities and you see like things that mathematically shouldn't happen, like just in the realm of possibility. And as a matter of fact, just the other was it I think it was yesterday. I believe it was yesterday. I was having a conversation with Sean, and we had a psychedelic night, and I had like a night. I'm not going to go into detail with it, but like I had basically this nightmare trip. It was the worst thing I could even fathom. Right, still a little woozy from it, like kind of one of those things. And I was trying to describe to Sean. I was like, dude, you know what I feel like right now? I feel like the Nine of Swords card. Like if you think about it, there's the person that's sitting up in the bed and the swords are all dangling over that person, and it's just like exuberant amount of stress and anxiety, and you almost feel like I get the image of if you ever seen what was it Infinity War. I don't know if you're into Marvel and stuff like that, but
I haven't seen it, no.
in Infinity War, Doctor Strange he gets captured, and he has like a bunch of these like sharp glass looking needles that are like puncturing up against his face, and that's kind of just what it reminds me of. But I say that because that's the card that we pulled, of course, and I was like, I almost wanted to put it back in the deck and just reshuffle, because I was like, I don't want this to be about me. I want it to be about, just with the vibe of the show. But I was like, whatever, we'll read it. So we always like to go to our handy dandy book. It's a guided tarot book, and it kind of, gives us a little message about, the depth of what it means and stuff like that. So I'm going to read that if you don't mind.
Sure.
Says, an anxious mind leads to restless nights. Explore how you handle worry and stress to transform its impact. A challenging and fraught card, the Nine of Swords opens the floodgates to anxious thoughts and worries that keep you up at night. The figure on this card sits upright in bed, alone in the darkness, as 9 swords dangle ominously above her head. Are these swords real, or are they imagined worst-case scenarios? The blanket that covers her depicts roses, symbolic of love, showing that there is compassion surrounding her if she would only uncover her eyes and see. Mm-hmm. Very symbolic, right?
Very much so,
the spiritual aspect of it says stress and anxiety are taking a toll on your physical health. You may be feeling alone or spending too much time ruminating about the same things. Journaling, walking in nature, or spending time with others can help you work through these negative thoughts. So I don't think that has anything to do with this episode, but unfortunately it has my imprint on it. So there's that. Normally Sean's
love that card.
Do you?
Yeah, I've a really intimate relationship with that card. It's I don't know if you guys have heard of the term like stalker card, like a tarot card that you always pull, or like whatever, it just keeps coming up for you. Mm-hmm. So the Nine of Swords has definitely been a stalker friend of mine in the past. So we've gotten to know her very, very well. But I think the interesting thing about that card is if you think about, again, considering what comes before and what comes after. With the Eight of Swords, she's literally blindfolded, right? In this case, the blindfold is off, but her hands are covering her eyes. So that's another kind of interesting way of seeing, like, okay, well, she actually sees the reality of what's around her now. She's out of her constraint, and the blindfold is off, and she's actually in a really safe place. She's in her bed, right? It's like probably the safest place that you could imagine being. And then what is she doing? She's continuing to do this, to engage in the same pattern, right? Which is usually what is continuing the spiral, or this anxiety sort of pattern. She doesn't have to anymore. She's free, and she's able to see the reality of the situation, but she's continuing to engage in that pattern.
Which is pretty interesting if you look at the Ten of Swords that follows. There's, you got 10 swords in this person's back, just laying there almost dead on the ground. But from what I see, it means endings and new beginnings. So I would say that's kind of almost like a death and rebirth kind of thing going on there, huh?
Yeah, I think that card, the Ten of Swords, is about surrender, right? Because you're literally face down, right? Like the swords are in your back, and there's, if I'm correct, there's a sunrise in the distance. It's one of the few cards in the deck where we have a lot of black. Like, we have a lot of the color black in that card, and then in the distance there's a sun that's kind of coming up, a sunrise, representing that rebirth. And maybe the final ending of that pattern.
Yeah, you can kind of see that the sky is black, but you see I don't know if that's supposed to be dawn or dusk, but
maybe dawn or dusk, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Wow. That's so crazy, the symbolism. You know what I mean? Just by putting some black and yellow in the sky, it shows some sort of very meaningful symbolism. Very interesting. Yeah. God, I just love this kind of stuff. I wish we were able to have you a little bit longer, but I understand it is late. You're on the East Coast. It's a little later over there. But we do really appreciate you coming on the show. It was lovely getting to know you. Yeah. And hopefully, we would be able to do it again, and maybe we'll start a little earlier next time,
Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah, that'd be so much fun. It was lovely chatting with you guys tonight.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Thank you for taking the time. Big time.
Yes. Absolutely. So if you could you let that's what we call our listeners, could you let them know where they can find you and maybe get a hold of you and your services and whatnot.
Yeah. So I'm on all the social media platforms, but I'm definitely most responsive on Instagram. So at highestgoodreadings is my Instagram profile, and there's a link in there for Modern Magic Salem, which is my studio space in Salem. And then highestgoodreadings.com is how you would book in for a virtual consult or a reading. And that's usually where I put up information about upcoming classes and other services as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with us. I definitely want to look into that because, as we're just trying to be these sponges and absorb as much information from the people that just get it. And there's no doubt in our minds, you absolutely do. So I would love to look a little bit deeper into that. And we're going to have all of those links for your show down in the show notes below for anybody to be able to get like a straight up, hyperlink through a portal, and maybe they can just astral project themselves right then and there. That'd be nice.
Yep.
But look, if you want to be a part of this conversation, you want to be able to join us every Wednesday night. Or if you just want to be able to get the shows a couple of days in advance, completely commercial free, come over to patreon.com/metamystics. That link's down the show notes below. We have several different tiers, but if you want to be able to join us every Wednesday night for the live show, sign up for the Wonder Wednesday tier, and that'll give you access to all of the live shows, plus all the shows, days in advance. And completely commercial free. It's a great way to be able to support the show. So we appreciate all of the one who have done so already. But yeah, Sean, any parting words for you, sir?
This was great, man. This was great. There's a lot of things that are really starting to make sense in my head after this conversation. I was just kind of listening that whole time, just trying to be the sponge and absorb all of the information. So thank you for that.
Yes.
Of course.
All right. Well, until next time, I think we're going to wrap it on up here. No meditation for the after show tonight. We're a bit on a time crunch as well, so I kind of picked a good night for it to be a short one. But look, if Nicole Luna came here and she taught you anything, it's that you don't know what you don't know. So don't just get weird.
Stay weird.